I want to talk to you guys about a political phenomena that I find very, very disturbing, and that is the resurgence of right-wing fanaticism, or really just remarketed fascism. You see, my whole life I have been used to conservatism, conservative ideas, or really the American view of conservatism, which is family values and being pro-life and being for traditional marriage and being in favor of Christianity and Christian values. And when it came to being a Republican, you were always associated with those views, right? To be a Republican, you were associated with being pro-life and being for traditional values and Christian values. One thing that I have noticed in these last 5 or 6 years or so is really the deterioration of this standard, really the deconstruction and the decay of this view, of this perspective. And one thing that I have noticed is that it's becoming less and less relevant for people to be pro-life, to be against abortion, to be for traditional family values, to be for Christian values. That is now, and this is one thing that I have been noticing, one thing that I have been aware of and recognizing, it is being seen, to have these traditional views is being seen as being a boomer, right? That's for the boomers. That's for the old boomers. And since 2015, 2016, I have been seeing the standard of what it means to be a conservative just dying out, disintegrating, and it is being eclipsed and absorbed by right-wing fanaticism, by forces of chaos, people who love chaos, people who revere the idea of chaos and destruction, and they embrace racial ideology, and they embrace things like Darwinism and eugenics, and they love militarism. And they wholeheartedly embrace ultranationalism. And they will not only revere the nationalism that is being seen within the United States, but they will also revere wholeheartedly the nationalism of Matteo Salvini in Italy. They will revere the resurgence in fascism that we have been seeing in Europe or seeing in Japan as well. And this is becoming the new normal. It really is. And I remember back in 2016 seeing Milo Yiannopoulos. And then there was that shooting that took place in Orlando, and Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller, they got together at this, gay conservative meeting, and there was all these weird pederastic posters on the wall. And Geert Wilders was there. Geert Wilders, the Dutch nationalist. And that was considered to be completely acceptable. Gavin McInnes and Milo Yiannopoulos, they were literally tongue-kissing each other as part of some political stunt, and conservatives, or I shouldn't say conservatives, because when I say conservative and when I hear conservative, I'm thinking, American traditional family values, pro-life guy. So I won't use that term, but the American right wing just saw that as acceptable behavior. They saw that as something that was great. Oh, it's so funny. Oh, yes, show it to the Muslims, guys. And it really started out as just a way to piss off the feminists and to piss off the Muslims. Let's just troll the Muslims. Let's just troll the feminists. And it escalated into really a leviathan. It escalated into a monster. When the mob of fanatics stormed the Capitol building, one thing that I noticed was the LGBT flag furling in the wind. Somebody was holding it up. And you see a lot of this sort of thing. And I've seen a lot of this sort of thing. When Trump first popped up, they were, the gays for Trump, and they were all these LGBT right-wing activists, and these people were wholeheartedly accepted. Even people from freaking Franklin Graham's ministry were hanging out with Milo Yiannopoulos and all that stuff, praying with him and all this nonsense. It's changing. The political paradigm that we have been so used to is disappearing. And what is replacing it, what we have always known as conservatism, is a new form. It's really a new paradigm. And I've always wondered, like, what do we call this thing? Because if we, it's really just fascism. But if we call it fascism, then people think, optically speaking, people think, oh, you're calling these people Nazis. I don't see anyone, revering Hitler. I don't see anyone revering Mussolini. So I can't really call them fascists and all this. And you see these people, and they will say, well, we're patriots. And we're nationalists. So it's like, okay, you're patriots. Okay, you're nationalists. So you're seeing this monster forming, and it consists of patriotism, right? You see these people, they're patriots, they're nationalists. But the old issues, or really the issues, I should say, because they're not old, but the issues that we have cared so much as conservatives doesn't really concern these people, right? Abortion, they don't give a damn about that. In fact, many of them will support abortion. Gay marriage, they don't give a damn about that. In fact, many of them support gay marriage as well. So the only thing that they have in common with conservatives is that they are very patriotic, right? In fact, they will go further and they will become nationalists. They will identify with nationalism, and they will express their nationalism, and they will exhibit their nationalism. And they make it very obvious. And they'll say things like, well, it's all these damn immigrants who are causing the problem. So they are, morally speaking, they're amoral, right? They don't give a damn about moral values, but they're patriotic. That's what we are dealing with here. So in other words, it's like you take a liberal, right? You took a liberal. This is what we're seeing. What we are actually seeing is really a bunch of liberals who are just nationalists. Because a liberal, supports Darwin, loves evolution, loves gay marriage, loves abortion. Liberals have these convictions. And these people who they worship Trump practically, they are patriotic, right? But they don't care about gay marriage. A lot of them don't care about abortion. They've become nominal about it. They've become indifferent to those ideas, or they blatantly support it. So they're just essentially nationalist liberals. I mean, they're left-wing nationalists in some respects. To a certain extent, I think we can make this observation. But if you say, well, they're just liberals, then people are going to think, well, you can't call them liberals, and because liberalism is all about freedom, and these people are against freedom. It's like, okay, fine. You can't call them leftists because leftists love Karl Marx, and these people claim to hate Karl Marx. So you can't really say that. Okay, fine. I understand that correction. So what do we call these people? I came up with a term. I call this phenomena Joker politics. What is Joker politics? If you look at the character of the Joker, be it in Tim Burton's Batman, be it in Christopher Nolan's Batman, or be it in the latest Joker movie that came out with Joaquin Phoenix, the Joker has this consistent characteristic of loving chaos and not really having so much of an end goal. Like, there's that scene in Christopher Nolan's Batman where Joker says, do I look like a guy with a plan? Because he doesn't really have a plan. He doesn't have an objective. If you look at Tim Burton's Batman, the Joker, played by Jack Nicholson, does a parade. And he gives free money to the citizens of Gotham. And he has these giant balloons hovering in the sky, and the balloons shoot out a bunch of poisonous gas and kills people. What was the objective of that? Nothing. There was no objective. Joker just wants to kill people. So Joker is a criminal, but unlike the traditional criminal who has a plan or who has an objective, which is to make money, to steal money, Joker's whole paradigm is just about causing chaos and killing people. Basically, Joker is a fictional illustration of all of these mass shooters that we've seen in recent history, right? The Columbine shooters, the Virginia Tech shooter, all of these shooters, the guy who killed all those people in Las Vegas, um, the recent shooting that just happened today in Illinois. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but some guy murdered 3 people and injured 4 others, and he literally just wanted to go out and shoot people. He shot some poor woman as she was getting her mail, shot some poor 15-year-old boy as he was sitting in a car, shot another guy, shot some poor immigrant from China. Just wanted to kill people. Had no objective, no financial interest at all, just wanted to murder people. This is what we're dealing with, everyone. We're dealing with Joker politics. They have this vision of chaos, but there is no tangible objective in mind. And really, this is in line with the fascist ideology. Because within fascism, there is this idea called futurism. Futurism was something that was originated by a guy by the name of F.T. Marinetti. And F.T. Marinetti came up with this idea of futurism, which is really the poetic or artistic extension or the poetic and artistic branch of fascist ideology. And futurism was something that Mussolini would embrace. And he came up with a manifesto. It was called the Manifesto of Futurism. And I'll read to you guys some parts of it. He said here, quote, "We intend to sing the love of danger, the habit of energy and fearlessness, courage, audacity, and revolt will be essential elements of our poetry." So it's basically a revolt for revolt's sake. Up to now, literature has exalted a pensive immobility, etc., etc. We intend to exalt aggressive action, a feverish insomnia, the racer's stride, the mortal leap, the punch, and the slap. So then he goes on to say, I'm skipping some parts of it here. It says here, we will glorify war, the world's only hygiene, which means, killing people is cleansing the earth. Militarism, patriotism, the destructive gesture of freedom, bringers, beautiful ideas worth dying for, and scorn for woman. We will destroy the museums, libraries, academies of every kind. We will fight moralism, feminism, of every opportunistic or utilitarian cowardice. So it was futurism, which is part of fascism, claimed to be against feminism, and also went against moralism. So it was against morality and against feminism. And what did we see beginning in the year 2014, 2015? We began to see this rise in the anti-SJW. Now, the SJWs, I have to keep saying this because people think I'm an SJW if I say these things, but the SJW was bad, right? The SJW was bad, but the problem with the SJW is that the SJW is so far away from reality, so disconnected from reality, that the SJW does not connect with the average person, but only pisses off the masses. For the most part, no one likes the SJWs. They are fat women. They have this thing going on. They got the jello arms. They got the purple hair. They got the weird hair. They don't look attractive. They don't appeal to the average person. They only appeal to academics and some crazy Zoomers or some crazy millennials on the internet. So the anti-SJW proved to be more popular than the SJW. When it comes to lefties doing really hysterical stuff, like what SJWs were doing, which was basically, calling everyone a racist, introducing really dumb ideas into universities, like, we need studies on why lesbians are fat or something like that. I don't remember, but it was just a bunch of nonsensical stuff, irrelevant stuff, things that are completely irrelevant to society. When it comes to lefties doing really nonsensical and hysterical things, I'm always worried about the right-wing response, because the right-wing response tends to be more strategic, more intelligent than the SJW initiative. And that's what's dangerous, because people look to the righties and think, well, that makes a lot of sense. And that right-wing movement ends up becoming very substantial. But if you look at the various movements in the past, revolutionary movements in the past. They were very chaotic, and because they had no objective, they ended up just being taken over by something more powerful, more tyrannical. A great example of this is the French Revolution. The French Revolution was very demonic, it was extremely violent, and it was against the king. So they said, well, the king is so destructive, he's such a tyrant. And it ended up being that the revolutionaries were more tyrannical than the king. In fact, the king really wasn't that bad. The peasants, even though they were the poorest of the poor in France, the peasants, for the most part, loved the king. It was the elites and even members of the royal class who hated the king, and they used people in the poor class to go against the king and to kill the royal family and all that stuff, and also just to butcher people. And most of the people who were butchered were peasants. The peasants were the biggest victims. Why? Why would people who claimed to be against the elites and against the royal class, but for the working man, why would they kill peasants more than anyone else? It's because it's not really about what they say. Because at the end of the day, what these people want is chaos. That's what these people want. They embrace chaos and destruction and pandemonium and acrimony. They want to usher in utter, just really a torrent of slaughter and bloodshed. That's really what this is about. So I call this Joker politics. That's what this is. And the French revolutionaries, they didn't really have an end goal. It's like the people who were all for the Occupy Wall Street movement. They didn't really have much of a goal. They didn't really have much of a strategy. Their whole thing was just going around and rioting and causing problems and making lots and lots of noise. But they didn't really have a collectively agreed upon goal and strategy. I remember a month ago I debated a guy. His name was Robert Cross, I believe his name was. And he told me that he was an anarchist, and he wanted to see blood in the streets of Washington. And anytime I would ask him about his end goals, or any question that I gave him that pertained to his end goals, he didn't really have much of a substantial, tangible answer, because these people just want chaos and they want bloodshed. And we saw this mentality in the people who were breaching the Capitol building. In fact, it was very obvious that something bad was going to happen that day. There was all sorts of talk on the right-wing dark web forums about doing something in the Capitol building. The poor police officers were heavily unmanned. They were heavily outnumbered, and there was all sorts of incompetence that happened before that, or incompetence, so they say. They didn't bring in they didn't really bring in reinforcements the day before the riot. They didn't want help from the National Guard. And then when the rioting took place, then they said, okay, let's bring in the National Guard. But even before that, when the chaos was taking place, the Defense Department was very hesitant to send in the National Guard because they said it would be bad for optics. Literally, this is what they said. It would be bad for optics because the last time the National Guard was sent, it was against the Antifa far-left rioting that took place. And they said the media was saying things like, well, look, there's troops on the streets against peaceful protests. And these Defense Department said, we don't want that type of bad PR. So they were very hesitant. And then eventually they sent the National Guard. But by the time the National Guard came, it was really too late. I mean, the police had already taken care of the problem, and the police had to send reinforcements, and it was those reinforcements that ended up solving the whole situation. But there was a couple of things that I wanted to read to you guys about what was read in these crazy right-wing forums. For example, there is a right-wing forum called 8kun. It's basically where a bunch of these fringe nutcases like to get together and talk about their weird, violent fantasies. And one guy, this is from NBC News, one guy said, you can go to Washington on January 6th and help storm the Capitol. As many patriots as can be, we will storm the government buildings, kill cops, kill security guards, kill federal employees and agents, and demand a recount. And that's why you saw the mob screaming, "Death to Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." That's why, for example, you had people talking about their right-wing jihad. There was a guy by the name of Eric Gavalik Munchel. Eric Gavalik Munchel uh, was seen in the Capitol building holding some, I wrote it down here, holding zip ties. And zip ties are things that cops use to arrest people. They wanted to arrest politicians. This was an attempt at a revolution. And they actually interviewed this guy's mother. Her name is Lisa Eisenhart. And Lisa Eisenhart said in one interview with the Times of London, she said, "I'd rather die as a 57-year-old woman than live under oppression. I'd rather die and would rather fight." Well, who's oppressing you? You know? This is why my philosophy when it comes to politics is what's good enough. And I think if we can just be content with what's good enough, there's even a Swedish term for this, I don't remember, but if we can just be content with what is good enough, then we will not have revolutions. It's like the King of France. He was good enough. The revolutionaries were pretty damn horrific. It's the same thing with this. I would rather live under the status quo American establishment than under some crazy regime of these lunatics. Just to be honest, I mean that's really what I would prefer, because what I'm living under right now is good enough. You know, people were complaining about Obama. Life was pretty good under Obama for most of us. I mean, unless you were unborn. But hey, I mean, abortion is considered to be constitutionalized in the American government, and that's impossible to get rid of because of the giant abortion industry. But life, for the most part, was good enough. Life right now is still relatively good enough. But the whole system is starting to creak and to crack and to break because revolutionary politics is becoming more and more popular. What we are dealing with here are not really conservatives. These aren't conservatives in the traditional sense of the word. These are fanatics. These are jokerists. They are essentially Jacobins. So we have to really brace ourselves for the rise of joker politics. And joker politics is not something that's just going to be done by righties. We've also been seeing it done by lefties as well. We saw that with all the rioting that took place recently. So yeah, that's the bottom line. Brace yourselves for joker politics. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.